Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Beatles Forever. So today we're going to see more things that Cynthia revealed in her book about her husband, John Lennon. And then we'll learn how the Beatles got along as well. So the Beatles were close. All the Beatles lived close to each other. It was almost like a second family. Even though Paul lived in a townhouse, he and Jane would visit with everyone. Cynthia said that they would visit each other more often than anyone else. She and John would go on holiday with one or all of the other Beatles. They spent Christmas Eve together at one of the houses and swapped presents, and there was seldom any tension between them. Minor disagreements were quickly sorted out. So John's relationship with each of the Beatles were different. He was most relaxed around Ringo, and Ringo could have him laughing with his jokes. So George, he had a mix of fondness and a disdain for him, as he might have had for a younger brother. And Cynthia said he was closest with Paul, but their relationship was complex. They spent a lot of time composing together, one sitting at the piano, the other writing down lyrics or strumming a guitar, and they would drink tea and were really into their work. So it was intense, and after it was all over, they needed time off to let off steam and relax separately. So John spent less of his free time with Paul than with either George or Ringo. So the Beatle family only extended within the group, not with Brian, their manager. He was the boss, and he kept his distance. Brian rarely joined them socially, even though he may have been invited. And Cynthia said his role was to be a friend and a mentor to the Beatles, not a pal. Next, Cynthia suspects John's having affairs. Well, Cynthia said she bought gorgeous outfits and had her hair done, but she still lacked confidence in her appearance. She said it didn't matter about other women when they were in Liverpool because she felt she was at the height of glamour, but now she was being surrounded by skinny models and actresses who made their living being gorgeous, and she felt there was temptations for John all around. John said he loved her, but he didn't like hearing her anxieties, so she didn't say very much. So the first woman she suspected was Alma Coogan, and she said she could see the sexual tension between them, and she flirted with him over time. She had no grounds to be suspicious, but Cynthia had a gut feeling. And then an incident happened not long after John and Cynthia moved into Kenwood. There was a knock on the door, and John answered, and Cynthia was close behind him. Bob and Sonny were on their doorstep. So Bob was a photographer for the Beatles, and Sonny was his wife, and she was a stunning Swede. She said that Bob looked furious, and Sonny was in tears behind him. Bob didn't pay Cynthia any mind. He said he wanted to talk to John, and so they all went into the living room for half an hour. So Cynthia went into the kitchen to give them their privacy. When they left, Cynthia asked him what was going on, and John shrugged and went upstairs to his music room. And not long afterwards, Cynthia heard that Bob and Sonny were divorcing. She felt he had been having an affair, though she didn't have any proof. People told Cynthia that John was a womanizer even when they were in college. In those days, Cynthia couldn't imagine he could be unfaithful. And Cynthia knew when the Beatles were on tour that there probably had been some flings going on, but all the women Beatles choose to ignore it, knowing that they would be coming back to them. But Cynthia didn't want to confront John, and she wasn't going to look for evidence. She felt that she was the bedrock of John's stability and that he loved her, and so she let that be enough. So John and Cynthia with money. Cynthia said they lived simply and they didn't drink that much, preferring to have milk with their meal. And John gave Cynthia 50 pounds a week, which was good money in those days. She said she didn't go on many shopping sprees, but when she did, she bought shoes. And she loved buying Julian clothes, and Julian loved to dress up and wear them. John loved shopping even more than Cynthia did, and then stores would open after hours for the Beatles to shop. John would bring gifts for Cynthia, toys for Julian, and clothes for himself. John had a thing about lingerie, most of which were extravagant creations, according to Cynthia, and he would see her and say, "Shall we dance?" And the fashion show wouldn't last long with the bed nearby. Cynthia always had to be his critic or admirer regarding the clothes. How does this look? Do the colors look okay? And other questions. Next, John had a thing for cars, and when they moved into Kenwood, John bought a Rolls Royce, and they had a chauffeur to drive them around. Later, he had it painted in psychedelic colors. It was fantastic, according to Cynthia, but not good for trying to go unnoticed. So later, Cynthia got her driver's license, and John bought her a white Mini Cooper, which she loved driving. Then one day, John came in excited. He had gotten her a gold Porsche. A few weeks later, she saw the Porsche was gone, and in its place was a red Ferrari. So John had gotten his license, and he ended up trading in the Porsche for the Ferrari. He never wondered if Cynthia might mind. Once he made up his mind, that was it. She then got a green Volkswagen Beetle. She liked it, but not as much as the Porsche, which I can understand, I guess. And John loved driving the Ferrari, but he was a terrible driver. So they turned the attic into a game room. She said scale electric car racing was a big thing, and John bought 3 sets and laid them out on an enormous track. And whenever anyone came over, especially Paul, George, or Ringo, John would drag them up for a race. In another room in the attic was a basic recording studio. It was thrown together. Records were laying around on the beanbags. Scribbled lyrics were all over the room, and there was a recording equipment everywhere. So John would be up there for a few hours, and then he'd call for Cynthia to come and listen what he'd come up with. She was his audience, and she said she loved all of John's music. She said his composing never followed a pattern. He would get an idea day or night and rush up to the attic. She said she got used to him leaping out of bed in the middle of the night to write out lyrics or play a song on the piano. And he would call Paul, and they would play and sing songs to each other over the phone. Sometimes he would get Cynthia to sing with him. Their favorite was Blue Moon, but their version was so bad they'd end up laughing. And he told her he knew she sang solo in the church choir, but he said she would never make it as a pop star. She was too posh. He would say, "Try to rock it up a little." Cynthia said it was a very busy time for John and the Beatles. They were doing foreign tours every couple of months, as well as doing British concerts. They also had to keep producing a stream of 3 or 4 original singles a year and a couple of LPs. When John was away, he missed Cynthia and Julian. He phoned as often as he could, but he preferred to write tender, funny letters, and he would tell her how much he missed her and that he couldn't wait to get home. If anyone doubted John's love for Julian, he showed his love in a letter he had written while the Beatles were playing Shea Stadium. He said he missed Julian as a person, said he wasn't a baby anymore. He's a real living part of me. Now you know he's Julian and everything, and I can't wait to see him. I miss him more than I've ever done before. I think it's been a slow process, my feeling like a real father. I spent hours in dressing rooms and things thinking about the times I wasted not being with him and not playing with him. You know, I keep thinking of those stupid times when I kept reading bloody newspapers and other stuff while he's in the room with me, and I decided it's all wrong. He doesn't see enough of me as it is, and I really want him to know and love me and miss me like I seem to be missing both of you so much. Another part of the letter, he said it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He felt it was wrong time to be emotional. I really feel like crying. It's stupid. I'm choking up right now as I'm writing. I don't know what's the matter with me. It's not the tour that's so different from other tours. I mean, I'm having a lot of laughs. You know the type, hee. But in between the laughs, there's such a drop. I mean, there's no in-between feelings. And he said he loved Cynthia very much. After John and Cynthia divorced, she had to sell the letter along with a few other letters. But the owner of the letter that I had just mentioned put it up for sale, and Paul McCartney ended up buying it. So wasn't he a sweetheart? He had it framed, and he gave it to Cynthia and Julian as a gift. Needless to say, it meant a lot to her and Julian. I'll end the video here. We can see that John and Cynthia were loving their life in Kenwood. They had money to get anything they wanted. They had a son, and they had friends nearby. There was a hint that something was up with John and possibility of affairs, but Cynthia chose not to investigate, feeling that John truly did love her. She was willing to put up with it as long as she could have him. So next we'll see how things continue to change with the Beatles in the middle of their whirlwind life as Beatles, and we'll see what happens next with John and his relationship with Cynthia. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be appreciated. And I hope everybody's been having a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of The Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.